came from Washington. And the debate in U.S. was mainly China, 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 and then Russia. At a certain point, they realized that Russia is playing a role in the world. Maybe they were too naive, thinking that European Union can hold Russia, and they're gonna deal with China, because technologically China is wow, 10 years in a sprint compared to others. So what is your take? How the U.S. policy is changing, and how this is actually reflecting the reality in European Union?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. That was really fascinating. I was traveling like 2 weeks. I was in Washington talking to State Department and congressmen. And then I was in Stanford and Berkeley, could give speeches also about Europe. And of course, first point was that we realized that Europe and the United States are moving together again. Because it's one of the guys I talked to said, I'm afraid we need some marriage counseling, you know. Of course, the United States was so important for Europe, and we knew it all, and NATO was important. But there were a lot of misunderstandings. There was a lot of Russian propaganda as well. You know, whenever we said Nord Stream 2 was not a good idea, they said, you only said it because the Americans want to sell their LNG. It's not because of security in Europe, and so on and so forth. So what we talked about was, how can we have a new relationship with the United States? But of course, you are right. Another point was, I asked all the people, how about what's happening in 2 years? Will Trump come back? And nobody said no. Everybody said, of course, this is a possibility, it's a menace, whatever. And today, I read what Trump said in 2018. In 2018, he said, you know, if the Europeans don't pay more, then the Article 5 will not be, I will not use Article 5. So that's what we know about America. So my point is, we have to have a new relationship with the United States. And I even talked to people now in Vienna from the Marshall Plan Fund. Shouldn't we have, you know, like seminars? I was really stunned how well-informed students in Stanford and Berkeley, many Asian students who are about Europe, they ask me about neutrality. You know, Asian students ask you in Berkeley, why is Austria neutral? Very interesting. So they are very well-informed about Europe. So I come to the second point, and I dare talking about Austrian neutrality, because I want to make the point, and you said it, of course we have to have a European, we have to be a world power, no doubt about that, because otherwise they don't take us seriously. But I think the really decisive point is, how do we explain it to the people in Europe? Is it really of an advantage of a worker, of a farmer, of a student in Europe, that Europe is stronger? Is it in interest of everybody? And I think, of course, it's in the interest of everybody. Why? Because otherwise the others will influence in a way that we do not want. So I think we have to bring much more emotion. I always tell you, when I was a young man, 1981, 25 years old, and working as an intern at the European Commission as a stagiaire. You know, the 25-year-olds around from Germany, Italy, all over Europe, we were aware of the fact that probably our fathers were shooting each other. And this was a very, very strong emotion. But the even stronger emotion was the positive emotion, that we have the chance to build up a new Europe. And for us, no doubt about that. But as you said, in 1989, 1990, and we thought we would live in a liberal, great, wealthy Europe, and nothing can happen again. And so the decisive word now is security. How can we give security to our people? And this is also a question for Austria. We're discussing it very intensively in Austria, also in Austrian Parliament. What does the government say? They say, we are neutral, so we are secure. And I say that's not true, because we know from the Cold War that there were always the ideas, and both sides had their plans. If the one comes through the Danube Valley, the others will come as well. So neutrality never was security. And that's the reason why we need now a security union. And Austria has to be part of a security union. And we have this mutual defense, Article 42, you know that, of course. But we have to explain it to people, to give the positive emotion why this is so important for us. And then the next point, you said it, my last point, of course, China. very interesting. I was talking to business people, the representatives of German companies in Washington, and really after 15 minutes it was only about China. They asked them, so what's happening if there would be stronger sanctions on China, if there was any trouble with Taiwan, whatever? It's a catastrophe. Whatever German company would name, it's over, you know. A real problem with China is depression in Europe. So what do we do now? Do we say, okay, we are afraid of China, or do we say we have to form a very strong union, not against China, but to explain to them that, and I always show, when I have my parliament speeches, I always show books, so this is also a recommendation, The World According to China, written by Elizabeth Economy. And I really recommend you to read this book, because that's also her last sentence. That's what they want. They want a world according to China. And no wonder why. For centuries, the world was according to China, and the Europeans were going there and tried to do trade with them, and we needed them, and we need them again. But what do? That we don't work according to China, but according to treaties we're doing with them. I don't want to dominate China, but I don't want them to dominate us. And one of the good news of this book, I also can tell you, is, of course, they have their plans. And you talked about semiconductors. They are not as good as they want to be. They had a plan that by 2020, they would be 40% independent on foreign semiconductors. They didn't reach this goal. And they still need Taiwan, which is also interesting. Without TSMC, all the production companies in China and in America would stop. Last thing, because you also talked about digitalization, there's also another book by Kai-Fu Lee about Silicon Valley versus China, about artificial intelligence. And there's one page about Europe, and the page about Europe is they are not part of that, you know. So no, they're not part of it. So the big discussion and the big fight in artificial intelligence is between China and the United States. And we don't take place. But without artificial intelligence, no future, especially no future in digitalization. So again, but where's the emotion? How can we explain it? But we have to explain it to the people. If we don't build up this united, strong security alliance in Europe, and security is more than having arms. Of course, security is on all bases. If we don't manage that, then I really don't see a future. But on the other hand, we want to be optimistic. Let's do these different points. Let's have a new friendship with the United States. Let's have a really strong European also defense union. And of course, let's talk to the Chinese, but you know, on an equal base, and explain to them, we need you, but you need us. And as long as we need each other, and as long as trade brings us together, then we will have a good future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helmut, for your initial remarks. So, you know, we started with the so-called big powers, and certainly they play a role in Western Balkans. I don't have to reiterate the role of Serbia in the region, but also the links between Serbia and Russia, and what is the role of Russia in Republika Srpska. You can tell about that to us. But at the same time, Helmut, I think, made a really clear point. We need a security union, and Wajman was always seen as a prosperity project, project of freedom, project of being part of the West, because we always wanted to be part of the West, to have our civilization back. But nowadays it became again a security issue. How do you see it from Bosnia and Herzegovina?
I'll give you a little bit of 2 sentences of my personal background. I'm obviously from Bosnia and Herzegovina, from Western Balkans, but I studied about the European Union in the United States. And then I went from the United States to UK to study abroad. And then I went back to Bosnia and then went to study to Germany. So I always kind of examined it from various different perspectives within the EU, from a country that left the EU, and then across the pond. And in my graduation thesis in the United States, I then confidently, as only a 22-year-old can write confidently, wrote that it's long-term impossible to remain a political dwarf while economic giant. And that was a very popular kind of popular statement about the EU in the United States back then. And not only as a description, but kind of as a prescription, that that's the way forward. And it seemed illogical entirely. It's like saying I'm preparing for the Olympic Games by eating healthy. I'm not exercising, but I'm eating healthy. So that discrepancy seemed like an impossible dream. And in that sense, I think this crisis is an opportunity, and I constantly reiterate it in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's an opportunity for Europe to rediscover its spine. And I think the crisis we are experiencing, it's not just a security crisis. I think it's a crisis of normative vision for the European Union. And that is, I think, the crisis that it's underlining all other crises in Europe and the perception, obviously, of Europe from the outside world. I don't know if you've ever played a game with a small child called hide and seek. And when they're very little, they have this habit of thinking that if they close their eyes and if they can't see you, that you can't see them. My son used to do that. You're looking for him and he does this and he somehow thinks that he's invisible. And I think that's what the European Union is doing in terms of problems. If we close our eyes, then the problems can't find us. And I think it's high time. It's high time to open our eyes. From the perspective of Western Balkans, I think it's not just European crisis. It's not just crisis for Europeans. I think it's even a greater crisis for those who are aspiring to join and who genuinely see Europe as the greatest peace project of all times in humankind. And we find ourselves in a paradoxical situation. I usually host students from around the world, mostly Europe, in our party. They come for study visits, they come to visit the parliament, and so on. And 10 minutes into our conversation, I find myself convincing them that Europe matters, that Europe is the future and that it's the greatest peace project of all times. Because people tend to get bogged down by minute details of, but we really hated that Brussels does this. But for us, from the outside perspective, you can't see forest from a tree. And I think that vision of Europe from high above is necessary in these kinds of situations. More specifically, when it comes to Western Balkans, we've been warning about this for years, if not decades, of a malign Russian influence in Western Balkans. Political leader from Bosnia and Herzegovina met with Putin on 21st of December, 2021, so not even 6 months ago. They met in Moscow, closed meetings, no photos from the meeting, no statements on what was agreed. Dodik spoke to Lavrov on 27th or 28th of February, which was only days after the invasion, where in the public statement made by the Russian embassy in Bosnia and Herzegovina, they said that they followed up on the agreement reached in Moscow on 21st of December and agreed the future course of action for the implementation of that agreement. That, I think, justifiably so makes us nervous. And this idea where we are closing our eyes in front of a problem called Vučić, where both Washington and Brussels are doing their best to see him, despite all the evidence, as the stabilizing factor in the Western Balkans and a one-stop shop. I like to say that we somehow, the greatest success of Western Balkans, that we somehow managed to Balkanize the political habits of Westerners who come to Western Balkans instead of emancipating ourselves. In a sense, I feel like in order to avoid the problem, we are looking for, and when I say we, I mean Europe, we are looking for one-stop shops in Western Balkans and hoping that that might be Vučić, to press that one button who will solve all the issues in Western Balkans instead of actually creating and multiplying the problems. And that is why I will remind you that the American embassy in the first days of the invasion said they welcome Mr. Vučić's statement on Ukraine and the neutrality. Neutrality became it didn't age well. Let's put it that way. So they saluted his neutrality, and then within days realized, oh, wait a second, perhaps neutrality is not enough. So obviously we are looking to the elections in Slovenia, the same way we looked at the elections in Hungary and were devastated by the results. And I think, and I will finish with this, I'm a debater. I competed in a debate for many years, so my instinct is to look for things to disagree about. And in today's introduction, a statement was made that citizens of European Union don't care about bureaucracy, they only care about how it impacts their own lives. I would argue bravely dare to disagree. Latest Ipsos poll from the 19th of April shows that citizens of Europe, of all 27, actually except Hungary countries, are more than willing to sacrifice even their own personal finances for a visionary approach of the European Union towards Ukraine. Netherlands is actually on top in terms of not only recognizing that, but also willing and believing that it can afford to finance help for Ukraine, willing to accept refugees. So in a sense, we are led by citizens and not brave enough and not quick enough to be inspired by those things that citizens of the European Union want, and we are playing safe, and playing safe doesn't win battles. And in that sense, I think that we live in a strange time where citizens are more progressive than their own governments, are more visionary than their governments, are braver than their governments, and it's a challenge for liberals. I believe leaders mean to lead, not just to reflect, and not just to... I feel like the main difference is that leaders before used to believe that they should stand out. I feel like leaders now believe if I can be as subtle in those 4 years and disappear into oblivion, then the better. I think it's time for leadership. Thank you.
Absolutely, it's a great time for leadership, and it's good that European citizens are pushing the politicians to do more, to engage more, and it was a great solidarity with the citizens of Ukraine. Certainly, I'm not going to read all the comments and questions from the previous panels, although I have some notes for you prepared. I'm going to open the audience for some Q&A. Please raise your hand if you have any comment or question. Guy, I skip you in the first round, but you'll be able to answer some of the questions.
I agree completely with the conclusion.
That's
I spoke
excellent.
for both of us, so
That's excellent.
So the problem is that we have that leaders needs to become again leaders. Eh?
Exactly.
Any comments or questions from the audience? Oh, it's too early. Well, I have some yes, please.
There
Emil.
are two.
You want to wake up?
Yes.
Good morning to all. First, I want to greet Sabina's mother, like I want to greet my mother. And why do I say this is because we had a chat with Sabina about it. We are actually struggling because of this lack of leadership, even to convince our own parents who are subject to a propaganda that is operating perfectly, to convince them that actually democracy, human rights, and European values, or the values that we share, the values of liberal democracy, are actually the answer to the challenges that we have in the region and in the continent in general. But then we get the same answer from our parents back, who are not so well versed in democracy or politics, and they say, but look at Vučić, he delivers. And look at the others, they just block us. Of course, I'm Macedonian, for those of you who do not know me. And I do not know what to answer to that one. I can just give them wonderful stories, good presentations. I can refer them to you as amazing speakers who are going to sound inspiring. But in terms of delivering results, I will be having difficulties to point out to cases. How do you think we can answer this in the future?
Emil, I feel guilty because you pointed Bulgaria, but I don't feel guilty because
I didn't mention
we are
Bulgaria, not even be of Bulgaria.
because we are good friends, and certainly, I mean, it's time to deliver. We cannot keep North Macedonia, Albania as a hostage of the unanimity rule.
The answer to that is that we need to change our attitude towards the whole question of the entrance of the Western Balkans and include and I go further and Ukraine. So we have still this attitude in the European Union to say, yeah, okay, they're gonna enter, but and then starts a whole range of arguments, what needs to be done, how much time it will take, why this is needed. Maybe we were too fast with the Eastern Balkan country, but with the Eastern European countries entering in the Union. And I'm saying, that's maybe true, but after 24th of February, let's look again to that. If we didn't had put the Eastern and Central European countries in the European Union, they would maybe today be the battlefield. Not in Ukraine, but in the Baltic states, for example. So if you look today to the enlargement of the European Union, that has been criticized, as you know, and that is used now as an argument to say not too fast in the Western Balkans. That is what is happening. I think we have to reassess everything. I think that there is an absolute need to speed up now the enlargement of the European Union for the security situation of this continent, therefore, and to stabilize again this continent, including Ukraine. And it's also needed because for the Ukrainians to win this war, they need that. They need that the fastest as possible, the Commission and the Council, hopefully in the next Council meeting in June, decide on the candidate membership status of Ukraine. They know it will take 5 years, 7 years, I don't know, but the fact that they are recognized as candidate member states is of a huge importance for everybody. For a soldier who is fighting in the Donbass, for a family who is living in Lviv, far from their home, so that they can keep the morale. It's absolutely key for them to do so. So there is a test coming on in the coming weeks. And what we have to do is to stop to say, Ukraine in the Union, will that work? And all these Ukrainians, will they not come to Europe? Or will they stay in Western Europe? Will that be, like we got with the Polish and the Romanians? Because that is the thinking in a number of capitals in Europe. And they have to get rid of it. There is another issue, far more existential on our plate. That is the future of this continent, the stability of this continent, how to stabilize it. And the way to do it is to have the Western Balkans, the fastest as possible, inside the European Union, including Ukraine. That is the purpose. And in my opinion, a key question that has to be answered, not in 5 years, in a few weeks, in June, in the next council.
I think Emil sparked a good mood in our discussion. So the topic of Western Balkans is really important, and we should deliver on Ukraine. I think they deserve a candidate status in this council, and we'll make sure that our family is united behind that. Helmut, you wanted to intervene?
I just want to add one point. When I wrote a book about Europe 1.5 years ago, I talked to a think tank in Budapest, very close to Orban. And this guy told me, Orban wants Serbia as quickly as possible within the European Union because he wants a middle European Union against the Western European Union of France, Belgium, Netherlands and Germany. And of course, things changed because his friendship with Poland is different now for reasons we know. But I think we really have to take care. And when on the first day of the war, a Serbian newspaper writes Ukraine attacked Russia, and we know that Vucic is behind or is controlling all the newspapers, we know there is no rule of law. So without rule of law, no entrance, and without free media, no entrance within the European community. But we have to make it clear to him and to the people in Serbia, what do you want? You want to be alone with Russia on the losing side, or you want to be within the European Union on the winning side?
We have to make clear for the citizens of Serbia, but also we have to make clear in our progress reports and to have explicit text saying that Serbia cannot sit in two chairs.
Right.
Hakima
Three
Al-Haite-
chairs with
Yes.
the Chinese as well.
Yes, with the Chinese as well. Please, President of Liberal International.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for this conference, and thank you for the inspiring speeches and presentation, and also thank you for maintaining alive the spirit of Hans van Balen through the name of this conference. Thank you so much. I'm relieved to listen to you because, yes, indeed, Europeans need a strong Europe, more efficient Europe, a Europe which of democracy and liberal democracies, etc. This is very, very good to listen to. The war we are living, and you are living at the doors of Europe, is threatening not only Ukrainian. This is tragedy. It's threatening the Europeans, but the consequences of this war are going beyond the frontiers and the borders of Europe. What I saw, as Madam say, I saw that this tragedy is giving a historical opportunity for Europe to accelerate its unity, its force, because indeed we were together with Timmy in 2018 talking about Europe defense. And that time, in Berlin, I heard many Europeans say, no Europe defense. Yes, we need Europe to have a defense. I am African. I'm not European. I'm the president of Liberal person. Nobody is perfect. But let me give you my opinion from this angle of, how do you say that? Yes, angle of Africans and non-European, you know? While you are talking about Europe and the future of Europe, I would say the future of the world, because what I'm seeing that there is now a clear division in the world. I'm seeing that in Africa, within 1 year, we had 3 coups, military coups. I'm seeing that Putin is creating a precedent, and the strongest countries will eat the smallest one. I'm seeing that the multilateral system, all of you have stand for many years since the Second World War to build is falling down and has no efficiency, no credibility now. So while you are fighting for Europe, we want you, Europeans, and we want more stronger Europe, not only to defend the security, the sovereignty, because Le Pen is talking about sovereignty. Yes, you cannot have a sovereignty, Mrs. Le Pen, if you are not strong, and you cannot be strong on your own if you are not belonging to a stronger family. This is also an opportunity when you look at the energy dependency. We have agreed the Paris Agreement in 2015. I was vice president of the Paris Agreement. And Europe, since then, has done nothing. The CO2 emissions are increasing instead of decreasing. Europe is increasing its dependency on the Russian gas. This is the opportunity Europe should seize to switch from nice words to actions and to implement the Paris Agreement and to stop the energy dependency from Russian gas. I will tell you something. Innovation, you have already in Europe. Together with Bertrand Piccard, we inventory, I don't know the word in English. Yes, we count, and 1,400 invention in Europe and innovation action to implement the Paris Agreement now. So invention and innovation, you are the continent of innovation. You need only to invest in innovation and to seize this opportunity. So, will Europe seize this opportunity to implement the Paris Agreement and to fight against this biggest challenge, this biggest war we are waiting, which is climate change? Will Europe build trust and recover its place in Africa, where 17 countries abstain to vote and to condemn Putin, and Putin is now spreading its value in Africa instead that you present in Africa. So I wish you success. As President of Liberal International, I'm supporting everything Europe is doing to become stronger with all our liberal family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Hakima, and thank you for always effective cooperation between Liberal International and our party. We hope to continue our good relationship and to build up even stronger relationship between Liberal International and our family. And indeed, European Union and Africa should play important role in global challenges. As you rightly mentioned, Putin is not stopping in Europe. He has his own puppets and he influences the democratic people in other continents as well. Hendrik, you wanted to come up, and then a gentleman next to you.
Thank you. I'm Hendrik Mortensen. I'm Vice President of ALDE. Thank you so much for some very, very thoughtful and impressive statements, particularly on the need for leadership in Europe. And I was reminded of one of my fellow liberals in Denmark who said that Putin did not invade Ukraine because he was afraid of the rest of Europe, but he did it because he wasn't afraid of the rest of Europe. I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I think it's very important, as you've all stressed, to put emphasis on the need of expanding the European Union to the rest of the Balkans, which are not members. But I would like to hear your insights, and particularly perhaps you, Sabine. Is there the necessary popular support for this all over the Balkans? And what about potential pockets of resistance in Republika Srpska, for instance? Can we overcome that? And can we overcome resistance in the western part of the Union? Of course, I was thinking of the resistance of my own country, Denmark, and France under Macron to the enlargement, because I completely agree. From a political point of view and from the point of view of leadership, we have to act now. I mean, if we haven't had the leadership of Helmut Kohl, we would still be discussing whether we should unify Germany or not. So action is needed.
So, distinguished panel, I would like to hear your comments on this particular question, because it's very important one. We always had this debate in our Brussels bubbles, but also beyond that. Do we need more enlargement, or what is the acceptance of the western part of the European Union? And Sabina, I would like to start with you. How much Bosnians like European Union?
Very much so. But before I get to that, let me just say 2 sentences about Emil's question. The first town hall meeting was held in Sarajevo, right? And I participated in it. I was also on the panel. And I'm delighted that you're here with us today. I think it's safe to say that Sarajevo really adored Hans and that he loved Sarajevo, so we loved having him there. So it's also an emotional thing to sit on the first and the last panel of this kind. And I remember something you said. There was an intervention from a member of the opposition from Serbia. And I will never forget what your response to that, Ilhan, was on the panel. It's not a question of what we are against, but what we are for. If we are only communicating as liberals what we are against, then we are not providing vision, and it's not enough. And it's playing defense and not essentially essentially providing a vision and leadership. When it comes to Western Balkans, and particularly Bosnia, and popularity of the EU, still overwhelming majority in both entities, in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska, desire to be members of the EU. And that is actually a common denominator for Bosnia and Herzegovina, one of not many common denominators among Croats, Serbs, and Bosniaks in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's another example of why it is necessary, because then truly is a peace project. Security policy, there are different attitudes, but when it comes to the EU, yes, the support is, I would say, dwindling, maybe to some extent even falling, minusculely, but falling, because there is this, I think, understood and seen apathy from the other side of Europe, and then there is a sense of lack of vision of joining. So there is no clear path. There is no clear path. There are local politicians to be blamed, the nationalists who would need to cut the tree on which they're sitting, I mean the branch on which they're sitting in order to join the EU, and quite frankly, many of them would be, if the conditions for reform of judiciary system, would be in prison, to put it bluntly. But still, despite all that, the popularity of the EU remains high. And as I said, in many instances, I think higher perhaps than even within the EU.
Yeah, Hans really loved Sarajevo. I remember one of his conference speeches in Sarajevo. He said, past belongs to nationalism in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but future belongs to naša stranka. So thank you for being with us today. Guy, want to comment, and then Helmut?
No, like I said, I come back from Kiev. I did it by Lviv, and Lviv by train, and then to Krakow. And yeah, if you want to see what the European Union, the positive effect of an enlargement of the European Union, you have to take that road from Lviv to Krakow to see the difference. It's a beautiful new motorway, I think, paid with the budget of the European Union, going to the border, fine, yeah, you think you are in Europe, it could be Western Europe, could be Poland, whatever, modern, and then you come to the border, and then starts, so it's an enormous, it's two different worlds that you see. And that was only possible because of first the end of the Soviet Union, the entrance of Poland in the European Union. So if you do that road of 300 kilometers, 100 kilometers on Ukrainian soil and then 200 kilometers to Krakow, there you see why it is absolutely key and necessary. And in my opinion, that's also, like I said a few moments ago, the basis for stability in Europe. Because countries who are outside, have European aspiration and are outside the European Union are a source of instability. Because there is always the threat, look to what is happening in Moldavia, look what is happening in Georgia, look what is happening in Serbia, to use these countries as a place to undermine the Union, Europe, European values, and yeah, to go forward with this autocratic rule that we see today. So I hope that this will be the mindset when in June during the European Council they have to decide, for example, on Ukraine. And the fact that I found it a little bit crazy, von der Leyen going with a questionnaire to Kiev, to country who is in the middle of the war, like they have the time to answer the questionnaire of the European Union, like they don't know what the answers are on the questions that they. I find it crazy, but okay. Apparently, we cannot escape that. But I hope that the pressure is so big and the necessity is so immense that now in June we can give candidate member status, and that we can overcome the classical, I should say, resistance. this classical resistance, yeah, that's in my opinion, can be overcome by the gravity of the situation now in Ukraine. And these people, so it didn't start from on the 24th of February when we were there with Hans in 2014. It was about what? It was about the EU association agreement that Yanukovych didn't want to go forward with. So the Maidan revolution started there with the European aspiration of the countries. And it are the European aspiration of the whole population. Don't let you fool by the propaganda of Russia. Yeah, in Ukraine there are Russian people living. No. They speak Russian. That is not the same as being Russian. Klitschko, the mayor, when we speak with his secretary, he's speaking Russian. Zelensky at home speaks Russian. Kurkov, the best writer in the Ukrainian literature, is Russian speaking. He writes in Russian. He can only not be published in Russia, and that's something different. So there is an absolute will also by the 40-45% Russophones that live in Ukraine to belong. And that means also that when we do all this and we go in that direction, we need also to rescape our policy and strategy toward Russia itself. We need to get rid a little bit of this defensive attitude toward Russia. I mean with that we need also change in Russia for the future. So to do more for the democratic opposition, to give visas to artists, young people who want to travel to Europe, to organize the diaspora. The Russian diaspora today is growing every day. It was already since 2008 500,000 a year growing, mainly of young people, bright people, Russian people. Not organized at all, absolutely not enough organized at all. And we have to recognize Russia as Russian language, as a language of the European Union. There are millions in the Baltic states for who it is the mother tongue. And if Ukraine enters in the European Union, there will be 20 million, okay? Russian-speaking people, but who believe in Europe and in European values. So we need to have an agenda toward Russia with a positive, offensive agenda so that we can take away also the arguments that Putin is using in Russian society, and that is working in Russian society, that we are in fact anti-Russian language, Russian culture, and so on and so on. What is not true. Because in my opinion, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky make parts of the European culture and European civilization.
Well, it's a good sound to my ears, but the more problematic question is how we can convince the non-convinced citizens in European Union when it comes to classical debate like this one between Le Pen and Macron, for example. Helmut.
The most difficult question given to me, because I wanted to say a few other things, but I think a lot about that, because it's also, talking about the Balkans, Western Balkans in Austria, that's rather easy because of the history, because they are so near, but we don't do enough, One example, when there was a huge flood in Serbia, I think it was 2014, was a huge flood, and there are lots of Serbs living in Austria. So I was editor-in-chief of a big newspaper, so we did a collection, to help people in Serbia. And so we collected the money, and with the former foreign minister Kurz, we went to Belgrade, and Mr. Vucic talked to us. And you know what he said? He said, thank you very much, and great, and I'm European, we work together, Europe, and so on. And he said, but if you ask people down on the street, who's helping us right now, 90% would say it's the Russians. Yeah. You know what? The Russians don't give us a dime, nothing. It's the Europeans who help us. And so I said, yeah, and do you tell it to your people that we are? No. And he said, of course he did. No, what did he say? He said, of course. Did we tell them? We did not. So what is? I'm back with the emotions. Where are the emotions? And that goes for the Balkans. It also goes for Austria, Belgium, for the member states of the European Union. How do we explain not only the common history, but that we all have a profit if we work together. We don't do that. And coming back to the Balkans, I had a conversation with your ambassador to Vienna a few weeks ago, and if I remember the figure right, it was 80,000 people who left your country alone within the last year. So is the European Union attractive? Yes, it is. Is it a good sign? Of course, it's not a good sign because they're well-educated people, very well-educated people, especially from the healthcare system and other things.
And they're not going to Moscow to study.
Very good point. They're not going to Beijing, they're not going to Shanghai, they're not going to Moscow, not to St. Petersburg. Of course, they're going to the European Union. So it's good in that case for the European Union because we need those people, but it's very bad for your country because if all these well-educated people leave. So that means, of course, that as soon as possible, we have to get you inside the European Union. But there's so many open questions. How about Kosovo? So where is the answer to that? Can we give the answer to Kosovo? No, we can't. It's only the Serbs who can give that. And not only the Serbs. Who are the other countries who did not recognize Kosovo yet in Europe?
5 non-recognizers.
You see? So next thing, how do we solve that? There's so many open questions, but it's always back to emotion. We have to convince people that it's in our advantage, that we all have a profit, that it's all in our advantage. And one word about Africa, which I also learned in this book. Of course, we know there are huge investments, and this Belt and Road Initiative also is part in Africa. China is investing a lot of money, taking out a lot of resources out of there, and so on. But they do investments, and they do a lot there. How is the soft power of China in Africa? Small. If you ask people, and that's I learned in this book, and there are a lot of polls, if you ask people, is it good that the Chinese are in my country, in different African countries? Not really, they don't see the advantage. So this is our chance, because of course it's much more attractive to cooperate with free and liberal countries than with China, because they do everything, that they have the profit from this BRI and so on. And but the next question in Europe: why do we have a 16+1 initiative with China? This is crazy. There must be a EU 27 plus all the other European countries, of course. And then we talk together with China, but we don't 16+1. And then they say to the Greek people, but we have this motion now in the in the UN about the Uyghurs. It's not in our interest if you vote. You don't vote with the Europeans. Okay, we don't vote with the Europeans. They blackmail us, so we have to understand what we are doing. But of course, the most important is the Western Balkans. But we have to solve. We have to also tell the people what are the open problems. So it is Kosovo, it's rule of law, it's free media. Of course, it's Republika Srpska, and it's the influence of Russia again. It's the influence of China. But that we can explain to our people. If the Chinese take over the Western Balkans, we don't, forget about a free and wealthy Europe.
Absolutely.
But,
let me pick up a couple of questions, please.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. I have a couple of observations. First of all, the accession that you mentioned. I covered the entrance of the Visegrad 4 extensively in the 90s. And there was one element that we still are dealing with, which is not just the filling out and the compliance with the acquis communautaire, it's also the actual implementing in society itself, and that takes far more years than we thought in the 90s. And the current situation in Poland and Hungary, in my opinion, the result of the fact that we went in too fast without realizing that the transition of society, as we've seen in Central Europe, is taking far more years. It's far more complicated than we thought in the 90s. So when it comes to the Western Balkans, I covered that as well for 9 years. And my suggestion would be pick up from the lessons that we learned with the enlargement in Central Europe. And if we allow those countries in the Western Balkans in, be prepared from Brussels, but also especially from us as liberals, to be on the ground, understand what the needs are, and not of the politicians, but of the people there.
Which brings me to my second observation, which is expectation management. I lived in France for 9 years. In the village where I lived, they voted Macron in 2017. The first round, a week ago, more than 50% voted for Le Pen. They hate French nationalists because they're in Bretagne, so they don't like French nationalists at all. But Le Pen is a better alternative than Macron. Europe is regarded as a distant organization. We have to make clear in the communication from Brussels, but also from the political parties, whether it's the Liberals or the Social Democrats or whatever, what we do. There is an accountancy, an approach, which is called integrated reporting, which makes clear immediately the effort and the output. If there's one thing that Europe is good at, it's making clear what the input has been, far less what the output was for the people on the ground. The people in the village that I knew for 9 years have absolutely no idea what Brussels does for them. The farmers in the village very well know that Brussels is a distant organization that's handing out subsidies to the big farming companies, not to them. So my neighbor, for example, was earning 900 euros a month. He didn't get any subsidies from Brussels. And he had to take 2 day jobs in order to make ends meet. Who is he blaming? Brussels. There's no reason for that.
Yeah, there is a fundamental reason for that. That is that the politicians, because they are responsible, are saying that it's Brussels. That's the way.
Of course,
that's the way it works. Even in a lot of competences that we even not have with the European Union, they're gonna say it's Brussels. That's the way to escape your own responsibility.
But that's a pattern that we've been seeing for the past decades.
I agree.
And I think our communication should be far more efficient and should be far more connected. What we do, what the results are, and what it means for a village.
It's not just the communications.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, it's not just the communications, it's also the actions.
Yeah.
It's all, as you suggested, that's not a communication issue. It's a policy issue who gets the agricultural subsidies, not just obviously.
That's true, but but that's what I meant with the.
I understand. I'm just supporting what you're
All
saying.
Right. Could you come to your
Yes. So that's what
I want to come back to your
the
first point about Poland
but
and the
so many
enlargement
people
issue.
are willing to speak. So
But
let's
that's what I
collect
meant
some.
with the expectation management. I think we should improve on expectation management. And if I could finish with a small question to all of you. How do you see, let me phrase it differently, do you think we are able quickly to improve our communication or our expectation management, especially with your ambition to enlarge the European Union quickly? Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to come to that now because so many people are willing to intervene. Please, ma'am. I'm going to collect the questions for you.
Thank you. My name is Somaye Dehban, a Dutchified Iranian living in exile here, and I find quite a comfortable home within VVD and our Liberal Party and ALDE. Today we heard a lot about mindset, about attitude, about emotions, and all of them are needed in order to take not too little, too late actions, but bold and taking a leading position. And for me, it comes back to our identities. We identify ourselves as liberals sitting here. But what does it really mean to be a liberal? Do we all have a similar understanding of it, or is it each of us have defined our liberal identity within our own party, within our own context, and coming back to the broader scope of the Europe and say that we all are liberals without actually having a common ground of what liberalism means. And to look at internally at our own party, VVD, we talk about freedom, we talk about responsibility, and then we come to reciprocity. And that's where it becomes about the context where we are living. But isn't it the time that we move away from this individual in isolation defining what does liberalism is for an individual, what does it do for an individual, and then at a later stage just talk about what does it mean in the context, and that's where we talk about reciprocity. Isn't it the time for every European country to start defining their values, not talking about the norms, but just the values within the European context? And isn't that the solution to having the emotions that is needed to take bold decisions, having the mindset to move forward, and having the attitude to wanting our leaders to take the leadership position?
Thank you. Could you pass the microphone to the gentleman? I'm going to organize this process a bit à la carte, but we don't have much time. So.
Thank you very much. My name is Hans Moyet from The Hague. Much has been said about the rule of law, Europe delivering. In order for Europe to be able to deliver, the quality of national institutions matters. And I think part of the concern in capitals about enlargement is based on the current rule of law situation in the European Union. And the track record of the European Union, and especially of the European Commission, unfortunately, has not been very promising so far. So my question is, how can we ensure that the European Union can have more leverage? Because the Commission is wavering with the RRF plans of Poland and Hungary. The cooperation and verification mechanism doesn't seem to deliver results. So how can Europe have more leverage, also to give reassuring signs also to the citizens?
Thank you.
It comes back to the first question.
Yeah, and Nathan is next, please.
We need to tackle this.
Yeah, we'll tackle them, all of them, yeah.
No, at the end it will be the European Union because member states are not acting. That's the point. But okay, I come back to this.
Thank you. My name is Natan Al-Bahari. I come from Serbia, one of the recently 3 elected liberal MPs that will be serving in the next parliament as part of a pro-European coalition that is now finally back in parliament after several years of absence. So we are making some progress, but there's going to be a lot of work for us, a lot of challenges, and of course we are hoping also and looking forward to your help and assistance in that matter. I just want to come back to there was a point here about the resistance in the Western Balkans, or in this case in Serbia under Aleksandar Vučić. There was a poll that came out a few days ago that indicated for the first time in Serbia there is now more people against membership of Serbia in the European Union than those who are for. And this is the first time it has happened since the year 2000 when the process began. And it goes back to what you said about the floods when you were speaking to President Vučić. The control of the media, you know, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine started, our tabloids and all of the media controlled by the government, which includes the public broadcaster, all of the national TV frequencies, have basically been repeating Kremlin talking points, have basically been taking a pro-Russian position, and at that same time an anti-Western, anti-European position. So it is no wonder then when we see these results, and it is something, my question is, and going back also to the rule of law issues and the way the Commission has been treating the accession process when it comes to Serbia and the Western Balkans in general. It seems that there is no appetite for serious action. For years, I come from civil society, for years we have been begging the Commission to take the freedom of media more seriously and put pressure on the government to do something, and the response has always been lukewarm. The response from Aleksandar Vučić's allies in the European Parliament, the EPP, has been very lukewarm and has been protecting the sister party of EPP in Serbia. And my question is, what can we, either as parliamentarians or you as parliamentarians in your member states or the European Parliament, are there any mechanisms left, are there any avenues left if the Commission won't act, especially in the enlargement commissioner being Mr. Veheli, who comes from Hungary and from Fidesz, is not something. There's not a positive outcome that we can have in Serbia. So we'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Please, the gentleman.
Hi, I'm Olivier. I'm part of the Young Organization for Freedom and Democracy, Young FEVIDE. I'm wondering, actually, the EU is not really clear about their strategy after Ukraine joining the EU. So we'll be also codependent on the US and saying, oh, we are fine with the NATO, and then go to the US to protect our borders, or what will happen? Because the EU is not clear about that. The second thing, which is really kind of important, what about us? And what about us? I mean, the people who are under 30, we don't have any representation, actually, if we are under 30, even in the EP, at least not for 25% or even 20%, or at ALDE. So what about the future? Because I think this is a really important factor that it should be considered.
All right, thank you so much. 3 more interventions, please. 4. All right.
See, and nobody had questions in the beginning, so clearly we inspired enough questions.
We spoke from the beginning and they're asking questions now. That's good.
Hi, I'm Garvin Walsh. I actually have a tech startup that works combating Kremlin and populist propaganda. And I was struck by the AI question and why it is that there are so few European tech companies that stay here. And one of the things has got to do with the fragmentation of the legal framework. A particular question comes to, this is a bit technical, but tax law, stock options for employees. We have people, staff around Europe, but it's very difficult to incentivize them because they get taxed heavily once the company actually becomes valuable. So I wonder what we can do as Europeans to, first of all, create an integrated European framework for these kind of incentives, but also to make sure that we can reward our employees properly if we turn out to become extremely successful in the next few years.
Thank you. Gianfranco?
Thank you. Gianfranco Dell'Alba, International Officer of Pure Europa. I take the advantage of the presence of the panelists to raise a question, to ask you about a proposal that was suggested this week by the Secretary of the Democratic Party, Enrico Letta, that certainly Guy knows very well, and certainly also the others. He suggested in an article to challenge this, to face this challenge of the Ukrainian statute, because as you have mentioned, we can say that is a candidate country, and after it will take years and years in order to accept them really. And so he suggested to propose to Ukraine, to Georgia, to Moldavia, to the country that are, and to the Western Balkan state, a statute of to put in place a confederation, a sort of a circle limited with certain only with certain let's say certain power or certain think in common, just to send a message to these countries that before to join the EU, they can be member of this broader circle. What do you think about it?
Okay, thank you, Gianfranco. 2 more interventions. 3? Okay.
Good afternoon, my name is Maria. I'm from Liberal Forum from Brussels, and I'm also Ukrainian, so I think it's important to share also perspective, which I have developed looking from both sides. And my vision observing the situation, particularly in these 2 months, was that a bigger part of the problem is, a very big part of the problem is the lack of EU strategy on Ukraine now, but also in the past at least 8 years, 10 years, and because initially the idea was that Ukraine was being treated as one of the Eastern Partnership countries. So basically, in a nutshell, what it turned out to mean that the EU was trying to keep Ukraine in the loop without, while also preventing it to getting too close to the EU, which is as a result, caused a lot of problems for Ukraine, but also for the EU, because it makes the European position look a bit vague, a bit weak. What was actually the reason of the EU, behind the EU strategy of trying to engage with Ukraine? And also now, I think it's a result of this previous strategic mistakes or a bit of misunderstanding, is that what is the EU's goal in this war? What is the ideal result for the EU? Whether the EU wants Ukraine to win the war, whether it just wants to help Ukraine to defend itself, what it means, and all this, the lack of very clear answers to this question actually makes it difficult for the EU to react, to act, because now they use reacting, which means it's a little bit behind, a few steps behind all the time, and instead of acting and setting the agenda and indeed promoting its own vision as it should be doing, actually, taking into account the Ukraine's territory, the Ukraine's strategic position, and also I want to. Now I'm thinking how difficult it was for the EU, all the resistance when it came to giving Ukrainians a visa-free regime a few years ago, because there was a lot of fear on the European side, all these millions of Ukrainians, what will happen if we give them a visa-free regime. But at the end of the day, it was a huge deal breaker for Ukrainians. Nothing